Hey class, let's go ahead and get started with our next lecture, which is lecture 4, Barriers to Physical Activity. This lecture is also a lecture that you will reference for your group assignment about barriers to physical activity, adherence to exercise, and how to overcome those barriers, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started with the lecture. Okay, this lecture I think is really fascinating because a lot of us can relate to experiencing barriers to being physically active and engaging in regular exercise. And so what we're going to talk about, these lecture objectives, you can kind of read through those right there. We're going to talk a little bit about some guidelines and how physical activity can help prevent some diseases. We're going to look at benefits, like what do we gain from being active? And then most importantly, this lecture is about barriers. What barriers are we going to experience and how can we overcome them? And then what is exercise adherence and how can we improve that in a workout program? All right, so first question is what percent of the US meets the guidelines set by the CDC and P, which these are exercise guidelines, basically, 3 to 5 days a week of vigorous to moderate exercise, which is about 30 minutes a day, a total of like 150 minutes a week. And if we look right here, less than half may met that in 2020. And in 2023, it was about 28%, which I find pretty crazy. But the pandemic had a lot to do with why people were more active. They had more leisure time. They didn't have to go to work, places were closed, they couldn't go out and do things, whatever they do normally. Their life changed, which we know about the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's why more people were active. But now that everyone has returned back to work and we now are back kind of living a normal life again, activity levels have dropped. And so these guidelines, I briefly mentioned them a second ago, but here's just generally is 150 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity per week, which, like I said, is about 30 minutes 5 days a week, which seems pretty easy to meet for some people, but maybe for others it may not be because of barriers that they experience. It's also 2 days of muscle strengthening activity, so lifting weights, doing any type of resistance work. So my question for you is, are you meeting those standards? Are you meeting those guidelines? So something to check in on with yourself and kind of think about if you fall into the category of those who are active and meet those guidelines, or maybe someone who needs to work on and improve meeting those standards. Next, we kind of want to look at some graphs and trends. This one here, we're looking at higher education, so percent of population with a four-year degree, and physical inactivity, so those who are not active. And so the way you look at these two and compare and contrast is on the right side, the red country. So all the states in red, we see the darker the red means the less physical activity they do. And so it means that the darker the state means there are more people reporting that they don't do any physical activity. And then over here on the blue side on the left, we see percent of people with a four-year degree. So the darker the state means the more people in that state have a four-year degree. So the whiter states do not. And if you look, we actually see a trend between the lighter or the white states on the blue side and then the dark red, which means education really plays a role in your physical activity levels. So something to think about when thinking about barriers is education, knowledge of exercise. Next here, we look at life expectancy and aerobic exercise. Life expectancy in years. So the darker the states live longer. And over here, the darker the purple states on the right do more aerobic activity, or they're more likely to meet aerobic exercise. And so you also see a trend as well. So these southern states down here in the Gulf are lighter in color, so less like lower life expectancy. And over here, they are not meeting aerobic exercise guidelines in the purple side. Whereas you see the darker states across the country in the blue and the purple means that they do more aerobic exercise and they have longer life expectancy. I find that really fascinating. And then last one looks at diabetes. And so prevalence of those who have type 2 diabetes and those who are meeting exercise guidelines. And so you look in the blue side with the tiny little dots looking at like the counties really. Um, the darker the state or the darker the region means they more prevalence of type 2 diabetes, which we know is non-communicable, it's not genetic, and it's due to lifestyle. And then we see over here the darker red states means that they are not meeting, they're significantly lower than the average amount of US people who are doing aerobic and muscle strengthening exercise. And so these trends to me, they kind of blow my mind. Like it's obvious when you think about it, but when we actually have data that supports that the more exercise you do, the longer you live, the less likely you're to experience diabetes, less likely you're to have any other adverse health problems. And then the one about education, pretty fascinating. We look here at how Texas ranks. One thing I wanted to look at is, first you can just kind of look in general. So overall, like education, economy, crime, infrastructure, natural environment, we're number 29 out of 50. And then we look over here and we see leading causes of death in Texas. Heart disease, COVID-19, cancer, accident, stroke, Alzheimer's. Again, kind of interesting statistics, some data to look at. Here, we're looking at Lubbock, actually. Okay. Looking at Lubbock, and we're looking at where Lubbock ranks, and we're in the top 100. So we're in the top 100. This is in 2023 of people who experience heart disease, diabetes, obesity, stroke. Like you are taking this online class, you may not live in Lubbock. You may not even live in Texas. But Texas Tech is based in Lubbock. And so I have these statistics about Texas and about Lubbock. And I find it pretty interesting. And so maybe if you're not from this area, you can look up what state, where does your state rank health report wise. You can also look at your city and see where your city ranks. Again, talking about Lubbock is 1 in 4 adults meet the activity guidelines. This is very similar to nationwide. So 25% of adults are meeting activity. That's very similar to what we saw earlier when we saw that like 29%. And so this is not uncommon. We see this kind of percentage a lot. 83% of subjects agree that they like physical activity, but when they ask what they're doing in their leisure time, over 50% of those people said non-active activities. So when they have free time, they're not going to go and exercise and they're not going to be physically active. Again, so just kind of something to think about. Why are these people not active? We have some statistics here, maybe not statistics. We have some kind of facts basically about, we know that being sedentary leads to weight gain. We know it can cause lots of adverse health problems, as you can read here in that first bullet point. We can look at the second bullet point and talk about how it helps with blood pressure, it lowers it. But also one thing to think about, if you're already healthy and you think you're fit, you think you're healthy, that's amazing. But exercise will keep you that way. And some people don't understand that exercise actually helps you to maintain your weight and not to lose weight. And so when we lose more weight that are non-essential body fat, it decreases inflammation, reduces insulin resistance, and allows our body to work better and prevent any type of non-communicable diseases. We probably also know all of these benefits as well, especially if you're someone who engages in regular exercise. We know it helps with mental health, like we see in the top. These second and third bullet points, those non-communicable diseases that are due to lifestyle factors. And then we can see other improvements due to that help with sport performance and being having a high exercise capacity, all of those things. And so exercise is amazing and it feels good and we have lots of benefits from it. But this question down here at the bottom, it's like kind of like a parody. Why are people not more active and do something that is so fundamental to humans? That's what this says right here. Why do people fail to explore something that is so fundamental to our human nature and so beneficial, where some people engage in physical activity every single day throughout their entire life? And so there are factors that contribute to why people do not have high quality exercise and then quantity exercise. Or those experiences. We see personal circumstances right here, and then we see social environment. But I'm not going to elaborate here because this is your assignment. So with your group that I have y'all grouped into, you have to list psychological, physical, contextual / environmental factors that you would classify as barriers. And so when we say a barrier, it's why is somebody not active? And if you want to think about yourself, your parents, your friends, family, whatever, people, coworkers, why are they not engaging in physical activity? Like if someone had to come up with an excuse or a reason, that is a barrier. Okay, so that's what you're doing on the first part of the assignment. So you can pull up your assignment and start looking at that and start working with your group. And then what we want to talk about is how do we overcome those barriers? So all those barriers that you just listed, you have to provide a solution that is easy to like achieve. So it needs to be a solution that we can talk to somebody and work with them and kind of figure out, okay, well, this is your barrier. I totally understand that, but here's a solution that I think is pretty effective. And so that's kind of the next step is from those list of barriers that you created, you have to provide a solution for each one. So basically, if you're working with an individual, a client, a patient, and they tell you that they're not exercising for whatever reasons, you say, hey, I know you're struggling with this, but let's figure out a solution together on how you can overcome. So that is what you're doing for your assignment. Kind of next question and kind of topic here is just some information that you do have to know for, upcoming quiz exam. It's talking about adherence. And so this word adherence, when we say adhere to something, it means we are committing to it and doing it over and over and over again. It's the most important factor is coming back and doing it again. What's bringing you back to exercise, or why did you fail to adhere to this program? It's someone's personal commitment to persist in regular exercise. My question again for you is why do people drop out? So maybe we get started, but people usually drop out within about 3 to 6 months of starting an exercise program. So if they commit to it, they usually get excited and commit for, those first few months. Maybe they see some changes, but then they plateau and they stop seeing results and changes. That's probably the biggest reason people drop out. There are several other reasons. So this is just kind of something to discuss with your group as well, and maybe kind of talk about why do people drop out, and maybe that's something we can address in the first 2 questions on the assignment. This here just looks at how do we improve adherence. I want you to think of and list how can we get people to stay in a workout program. And another word we have up here is attrition. Attrition means dropout. Like we lose people, people don't show up, people fail to commit to the program, like they're dropping out. And so we want to improve adherence to an exercise program, and we want to reduce attrition. What are some things that we can do? What can fitness professionals, gyms, community workout groups, hospital-based fitness centers, what can we do to get people to stay active and stay in the program? And then there's some questions I have for you to think about is high school athletics, PE. Did that motivate you to engage in activity outside of class? And then also think about just like early physical activity engagement. As an adult, did what you do growing up, did that influence what you do now? Like, are you still as active, or did that have any impact on your physical activity status, like becoming an adolescent and into adulthood? And then just kind of think about what factors contribute to your decision to continue or discontinue physical activity. Like, are you still active? If so, why? And if you're not active anymore, maybe what contributed to that? But that is the end of this lecture. And so I hope you enjoyed it. I find it fascinating. And this is the lead up to working on your assignment with your group. And so refer to this lecture and then get working and get talking on it. Okay, great. We'll talk to you guys later.